This is our territory. We cannot be set aside anymore.
Tonight, it was supposed to be a proud reconciliation moment for the Liberal government, but the Algonquin hold their ground to remind colonized Canada of whose territory this is.
A call to action from the chiefs, in particular the Chiefs Committee on Education here in the Yukon, to Yukon government and to the rest of First Nations to say, what are we all going to do?
Yukon First Nations gather to plan how to meet the needs of their communities.
No words can describe, it's just a wonderful feeling.
And why the people of a Cree community in Saskatchewan can finally bring the whole family to watch their kids' high school graduation.
Good evening, welcome to APTN National News. I'm Dennis Ward.
And I'm Melissa Ridgen. An Indigenous-led group says they're prepared to make a bid for the Trans Mountain Pipeline and an expansion project as early as next week. Project Reconciliation wants to have a majority stake in the project.
They say the $7.6 billion they need would be raised through equity markets at no cost to taxpayers. In a statement, Delbert Wapas, the founder of Project Reconciliation, said there is real momentum towards Indigenous ownership. Wapas calls Trans Mountain a pipeline to reconciliation. Steve Mason, who is heading up financing, says, quote, "We've been assembling something that will work for all sides, and it will be ready as early as next week. When the government wants to talk, we'll be ready." Project Reconciliation says its ownership structure is open to almost 340 First Nations and Métis communities in Alberta, BC, and Saskatchewan.
Algonquin Anishinaabe Grand Chief Verna Polson's hunger strike and hydration strike is over as of yesterday. The Algonquin and Government of Canada reached a deal late in the afternoon. Polson was on a hunger strike demanding her people be equal players in the new Indigenous people's space in Ottawa. Instead, the Canadian government offered a spot behind the building for the Algonquin to use as they wish. Polson refused to give more specifics about the deal that ended her protest, but says having space inside the building is still her goal, and her nation should have been acknowledged from the start.
I was looking at the building at night. It's like, this is just a building. This is just a material. So then it became more, this is our territory. We cannot be set aside anymore when it comes to our territory. They need to reach out to the rightful owners of the territories, which is the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. And that's all I wanted to do.
The Council of Yukon First Nations held their 39th annual General Assembly in Dawson City. Representatives of 14 Yukon First Nations came together to discuss their top priorities, including education, child welfare, and climate action. APTN's Chris McIntyre was there and has this report.
For me, it's about building partnership and relationships that are going to be fostered on mutual respect.
To kick off this year's assembly, Peter Johnston, the Grand Chief of the Council of Yukon First Nations, was voted in for a second term in office. Johnston says the assembly is where ideas turn into reality.
The General Assembly is a tool utilized to help bring us together to update. It has other meanings such as celebration and bringing us together as people, but at the end of the day, we get the mandate from the General Assembly through resolution, then we go out and start making the mandate come to life.
One of the big issues that came up this year is education. A recent report by the Auditor General stated the Yukon is failing Indigenous, rural, and special needs students. Yukon Regional Chief Kluwani Adamak says kids are still falling through the cracks.
We know the stats, we know the reality, and we know that there's a system that's failing our kids. And so this was about, really looking to what are the solutions that we need to see implemented, and, a call to action from the chiefs, in particular the Chiefs Committee on Education here in the Yukon, to Yukon government and to the rest of First Nations to say, what are we all going to do?
Alberta's Regional Chief Marlene Poitras was also invited to the meetings. A topic of interest for her was climate change.
If you look at across the country, even across the world, the fires and the natural disasters that are happening, I think that we really need to start having those discussions, especially when the scientists are saying that, you know, we have 5 years.
Each Yukon First Nations knows they have a lot of work ahead, but despite the seriousness of the meetings, it was also a chance for more than just business.
It's like there's the work and the business we need to do, but then there's the connection, right? There's the sharing a meal, sharing music, sharing a story, having our elders here, laughter. Those are all such important parts of who we are as First Nations people here in the Yukon.
Chris McIntyre, APTN National News, Dawson City.
And we want to hear what you have to say. Here's how to continue the conversation. Send your emails to news@aptn.ca. Find us online at aptnnews.ca and on youtube.com/aptn news. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for the latest Indigenous news.
Indigenous people rocked the vote for the federal Liberals in 2015, but a new poll shows that doesn't look like it's going to happen this time.
After the break, 2 professors will join us to talk about that poll. But first, a look at Thursday's weather forecast. Starting off on the East Coast, sunny and a high of 30 for Fredericton. Not so warm, 12 with rain in St. John's. Sunny and 11 for Nain, 21 with showers for Happy Valley, Goose Bay. A warm day across Quebec, 34 in Montreal, 33 in Saguenay and Val-d'Or. 30 under sunny skies for North Bay and Toronto, a high of 32 for Ottawa. 26 under the sun for Thunder Bay, 34 in Kapuskasing with sunny skies. A high of just 4 for Churchill with rain on the way, 21 in showers for God's Lake. Sunny and 26 for Winnipeg, Gimli, Princess Harbour, and Barons River. Cooler in Saskatchewan, 19 in Saskatoon, 18 in North Battleford. 18 for Meadow Lake and Buffalo Narrows.
Welcome back. A new poll looking at voter intention in the upcoming federal election this fall doesn't look good for the relationship between Indigenous people and the Prime Minister they helped bolster to victory in 2015. I rounded up a couple of pundits to unpack what this new data means as we inch towards a federal election this fall. To unpack the poll's findings, joining me now is Nagan Sinclair, an associate professor with the University of Manitoba and columnist for the Winnipeg Free Press, and Robin Bourgeois, who is an assistant professor with the Center for Women's and Gender Studies at Brock University. Thank you, guys.
Thank you much.
So I should start by saying that this was an online poll that was conducted by Public Square Research and Morrow Blue a couple of weeks ago. It included 500 Indigenous people from across the country, and it was commissioned by the CBC. So in 2015, there was a big push to rock the vote for Justin Trudeau and the Liberals, who enjoyed 41% of our vote. According to this poll, though, that support has dropped to 24%. I'll start with you, Robin. Why has it dropped?
I mean, I think there's all kinds of reasons, but I think when it boils down to it, the bottom line is that Trudeau came out swinging big. He came out looking impressive and saying, you know what, we're going to change the relationship we have with Indigenous peoples in this country. And he's done some things that are, you know, interesting and maybe productive. I mean, I think there are people who would say that the National Inquiry, for example, was a really good thing to have happen. At the same time, he's also walked all over Indigenous people's rights. We are dealing with the fact that he wants to drive a pipeline through Indigenous lands without Indigenous permission. We also are seeing what he's doing. Sorry, my mind just went on a little blank, but with UNDRIP, we saw UNDRIP go before the government and that bill not be passed. So I think he is walking, or he's talking, but he's not walking the talk anymore. And I think Indigenous Canadians, or well, Indigenous peoples in Canada, are really troubled by that.
Nagan, what are your thoughts on why this support has torpedoed?
Well, absolutely what Robin said, but I would add that, you know, the difference between this election and the previous election is, I mean, Indigenous peoples were very much voting against Stephen Harper and the long reign of terror that Stephen Harper was bringing to Indigenous communities. This time around, I think Indigenous peoples generally don't feel that same kind of vitriol towards Andrew Scheer. Maybe that will come, maybe it won't. But generally what Indigenous peoples are also feeling are This is a typical way that Liberals operate. They come in, they make a great deal of promises, and then through a kind of back doorway tend to betray Indigenous trust. So this is not anything new, but I think this is generally how Liberals and Indigenous peoples interact in cycles throughout history.
Yeah. So this support, interestingly, it was according to the poll, there's an equal divide of the support that the Liberals have lost, have gone to the Conservatives and the NDP, and gone to them equally. Does that surprise either of you?
I would say no. I mean, Indigenous peoples generally lean towards New Democratic parties if they vote at all. And I think what the issue you're going to see with this election, I think Indigenous peoples are just not going to participate as much on any kind of scale that they did last time around.
Robin, your thoughts on that split that the Andrew Scheer Conservatives have got a chunk of that support that the Liberals lost, has the NDP. Are you surprised by that?
It actually really concerns me. I mean, I survived the Harper era and that Conservative regime that had no interest in Indigenous peoples whatsoever. So I'm really scared when I hear statistics like that suggesting that our people are supporting Andrew Scheer, because, I mean, this is a man who came out not very long ago and basically denied the claims of the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and denied the aspect of genocide. So that really frightens me. Though I see there's hope. I mean, I think the NDP certainly is a little bit more progressive. I do hope that maybe we would consider Green Party, for example, as another valid option given our Indigenous concerns around the environment.
Yeah. I was a little bit surprised that there wasn't a bigger boost in support for the Green Party, actually. So I'll ask you both, just to wrap it up, Nigon, your final thoughts on what you think we can expect in this fall election.
Well, I think what's going to happen is you're going to see it's such a razor-thin margin this time around. The Conservatives and the Liberals are so close that I think the Liberals have learned a bit of a lesson in terms of making huge promises and then failing to deliver on those, and also the treatment of Jody Wilson-Raybould, for example. I think publicly they've learned a number of things, and if they get a minority government, or if the Conservatives get a minority government, you'll see a real kind of Indigenous peoples will play a role within that division. And I think that could be a good thing between those two parties, the natural sort of governing parties within the country.
Yeah. Robin, do you think that we're going to be rocking the vote this time?
Oh, you know what? I think there's so much on the table, and I think Indigenous peoples are incredibly savvy, and I think we are paying, careful attention to what's going on, and I think there's going to be a lot of pandering. I think there's going to be a lot of parties that are trying to make themselves seem really good for Indigenous peoples when, really all of these governments are all colonial governments at the end of the day anyway and are serving themselves. So I think, I really hope that, maybe some of us who are really into politics will go out and help Indigenous peoples understand some of the issues at play and help unpack some of those promises that are made by the parties.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys both for stopping in to share your thoughts on this, and I guess we'll have you back when it's election time, and we'll see if what you said today is right.
Miigwech, thank you.
Thank you so much.
After renaming a controversial downtown street on Indigenous Peoples Day, Montrealers were left wondering what's next. Well, a local tour guide has some thoughts. Lindsay Richardson explains.
It's presented underneath the triumphant Sieur de Maisonneuve. So this statue is pretty much considered quite racist, and it even gets worse.
As a self-professed expert on Montreal's hidden histories, Donovan King's tours normally deal with ghostly fanfare. Today we're exploring a scarier reality. Monuments celebrating Quebec's violent colonial past, like this one at the tourist epicenter of the city.
This is called the Exploit de la Place d'Armes. It's a French legend. We don't know how much validity or truth there is to this, but in a nutshell, they say that the Sieur de Maisonneuve single-handedly blew the head off of the Mohawk leader here in this exact area. So again, they're celebrating genocide on a statue in a public square. This is really unacceptable in the age of truth and reconciliation.
Which is why for years this Irish Montrealer made it a mission to confront colonial realities lost to history and otherwise ignored in official city tours.
They never taught us we're on Mohawk territory. They never taught us how to do a territorial acknowledgement. They didn't teach us any Mohawk vocabulary, any Indigenous perspectives. We never visited Ganawage. We never had a First Nations speaker in the class. There's a lot of denial a lot of white fragility happening, and that has to change.
And slowly, things are.
Aujourd'hui, on change le nom d'une rue qui était très contestée, qui était polémique, avec laquelle il y avait un malaise pour les Montréalais, Montréalaises.
After a decade of prodding, last week the city of Montreal stripped the name of British General Jeffrey Amherst from a downtown street, changing it to Aradega, a Mohawk word signifying brotherhood between nations.
That is an awakening of the senses and the mind of people to say that we need to try and correct things, or at least to explain why there's needs to change.
In 1763, during the Pontiac War, Amherst ordered 2 smallpox-infested blankets and a handkerchief be gifted to native tribes in order to neutralize and obliterate them.
Ce qui s'est passé, par exemple, avec Amherst était absolument, je veux dire, inimaginable, horrible, mais ça s'est quand même passé. Alors, il ne faut pas non plus effacer l'histoire. Moi, je suis plutôt en faveur de créer des dialogues.
A statement Donovan saw as an invitation to continue pointing out problematic landmarks for the mayor's consideration.
You see a lot of the statues are being attacked with paint, and this just happens so often nowadays that it's not even reported in the news, and so clearly something has to be done.
Montreal is the only North American city with a monopoly of tour guides. When Bylaw G2 was introduced during Expo 67, it mandated all licensed guides to stick to a script glorifying New France and founding fathers like Jacques Cartier, whose imposing bronze likeness towers over this park in St. Henry.
He's standing on a stump to signify the land that has yet to be cleared, and he's also surrounded by 4 disembodied Aboriginal heads, which of course signifies the genocide that's still ongoing here. And so this is a very racist statue, and quite frankly, I don't think anyone within the settler society would tolerate having their own disembodied heads on a statue spitting out water.
The same city-sanctioned script, he says, all but ignores Indigenous peoples, some of whom are buried here beneath Place du Canada and its statue of John A. Macdonald.
John A. Macdonald was responsible for genocide. He did it out in the plains through famine. He also did it through the residential schools. So this guy does not belong on Montreal's landscape.
But unlike other Canadian cities, Montreal currently has no plans to remove it.
This is revisionist history. That's the problem people don't realize, is that, this type of history that's glorifying genocide is revisionist.
Which, for Donovan, is all the more reason to push for truth in the era of reconciliation.
Georges Etienne Cartier was no John A. Macdonald, who was more in favor of genocide and white supremacy.
Lindsay Richardson, APTN National News, Montreal.
In Saskatchewan, video of an officer pulling his gun, screaming threats during an arrest in the community of Pelican Narrows went viral on social media. Now RCMP are investigating 3 separate incidents or separate arrests in the same evening where the same officer pulled a firearm. The officer has been reassigned away from the community. APTN's Priscilla Wolf has the story.
Over the July 1st weekend, 2 separate short videos were shared online, both involving the same officer in Pelican Narrows. The community is part of the Peter Valentine Cree Nation. One video shows an underage male with a machete near him on the ground. According to RCMP, the officer was responding to calls involving weapons for 2 of the incidents. Very strong language and force is being used by the officer. In an email to APTN, the RCMP stated the same officer made 3 arrests at separate locations during one evening shift and had his gun out for each one of the arrests. Chief Beattie says the Peter Valentine leadership met with RCMP in Prince Albert yesterday.
They asked for that individual officer to be removed from the work schedule immediately, which happened. The officer was taken off that work schedule in Pelican Narrows.
Leadership say they are willing to work with the RCMP to find answers.
They also asked for the removal or the relocation of that officer and an investigation, of course, because of the nature of, you pull your firearm as a police officer, obviously there has to be very good reason to do that. But to do it 3 times.
Chief Beattie doesn't know the details of what happened prior or after the incidents.
It's going to take a little bit of time to do their investigation. We're going to wait for that to happen, and to see what their what actions they're going to take regarding the officer. And then if we're not satisfied with the results of their actions, then of course it will be we'll address that with them again.
The RCMP also stated that the incidents are being reviewed. These incidents will be reviewed in their entirety, including the moments before and after what is shown in the videos. Priscilla Wolf, APTN National News, Saskatoon.
Time for us to take another quick break, but stick around. We've got more news to come.
First, a look at the rest of Thursday's weather forecast. Picking back up in northern Alberta, showers and 16 for Grand Prairie, rain and 17 for Fort McMurray, 19 with rain for High Level. Showers and 20 for Medicine Hat, a high of just 12 with rain for Calgary. On the west coast, 21 and partly cloudy for Campbell River and Victoria, 22 and rain in Bella Coola, 22 under sunny skies for Dease Lake, showers and 23 in Smithers. 18 with rain for Old Crow, a nice high at 25 for Whitehorse, 24 under sunny skies for Fort Liard, Trout Lake and Wrigley, 21's the high for Yellowknife, 8 with showers in Sax Harbor, 16 and rain for Fort McPherson. Warmer in Baker Lake with a high of 19 under sunny skies, 17 and sunny for Cambridge Bay, 9 in Arctic Bay, 15 in Joe Haven.
Welcome back. There's been a massive eruption at a volcano on the Italian island of Stromboli, north of Sicily. At least one hiker was reportedly killed as plumes of smoke shot into the sky. Hundreds of tourists and residents at a town nearby scrambled for safety after hearing a loud explosion. Some barricaded themselves inside their homes, others headed for the sea. The eruption sparked a number of fires on the slopes of the volcano. Stromboli is one of the 3 main active volcanoes in Italy.
Results of an examination conducted on the 6th North Atlantic right whale found dead this week suggest the mammal died after colliding with a vessel. The whale known as Clipper was found dead on Thursday, and an examination on the mammal was completed on Monday. The results come after a third of the 6 whales found dead this year had also died after colliding with a boat. There are only about 400 North Atlantic whales left, with deaths outpacing live births. Gloomy end to the newscast tonight, unfortunately.
Yeah, I didn't know that it was so bad for the whales, the northern whales.
That is your APTN National News for this Wednesday.
For the latest Indigenous news, visit our website, aptnnews.ca, and download the APTN News app on your phone. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Have a great night.
And I'm Dennis Ward. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you back here tomorrow.